10.4, our public hearing to introduce an ordinance adopting district-based elections for members of the City Council pursuant to the California Voting Rights Act. I'll invite our City Attorney, Janet Colson, and perhaps her colleague, Jim Priest, to make a report from where we are.
Yes, thank you. And I would like to point out that Jim is on Zoom if we need him. So this is our fifth post-map hearing. We had 3 pre-map hearings. So this is the 8th public hearing overall on this item. We have under consideration 11 maps. 2 of them are from the demographer. 9 of them are from members of the public. 3 of them are 4 district plus a separately elected mayor. And the rest are 5 district maps. All of them are legally compliant. Any of them could be selected. And where we're at right now is that we are under a somewhat artificial deadline of July 20th. That is the date that has been given to us by those who are threatening to sue us over this issue. And our last regularly scheduled meeting is July 17th. And so what that means is that we're to adopt an ordinance for districting, and we need to do that adoption at a regularly scheduled meeting. So that's July 17th. At least 5 days prior to that, we need to introduce an ordinance. So that's kind of your time frame of where you are right now, what you're looking at. We have discussed the potential option of having a default map and calling an election, a special election, to be consolidated with the statewide primary in March. We've found out the cost of that, and we estimate it's probably in the neighborhood of $60,000 to $65,000. That's the estimates that are given to us by the county who conducts the election. A special, otherwise standalone election would be much more, probably in the neighborhood of $250,000. And that election could, if you so decided, could be where the electorate would weigh in on a map that you put before it. You would need to have a default map in this ordinance that we've been talking about. And I think where we're at right now is we have discussed map 5, the 5 district map, as being the best of the 5 district maps. We have tried to modify a little bit of some of the little bits that stick out, and found that we really can't do that because we will be breaking up census blocks. And so I think map 5 is pretty much set in its current configuration. You haven't had a lot of discussion about 4 district maps. And so you could have that discussion tonight. I've tried to put options out there that leave you as much leeway as possible for making a decision as to what you'd like to do. The way I see it is you have essentially 3 options. One of them is here tonight, where you select the default map, introduce an ordinance, ask us to bring back documentation, the necessary resolutions, ordinance to call an election, do that on July 17th, to put 1 or more measures before the electorate. And all of that will be decided in those documents that would come back on July 17th. You could also have a special meeting on July 10th. That's another option. You don't have to introduce tonight. You could introduce an ordinance on July 10th. Ordinances can be introduced at special meetings. They only have to be adopted at regular meetings. So you could decide that you want to just select one of the maps and direct us to bring it back for introduction on July 10th. We can do that. And then adoption on July 17th. So this is, we're looking for direction. We'd like to know what the council would like for us to do next.
Is that the end of your report?
Pretty much, but I'm here for questions.
All right. Anyone have any questions of Janet Colson at this point before I open public comment? I have a question, Janet. As I read the ordinance that you provided for our consideration, it seems to require that the council select a 4-district alternate map as part of July 17, that we need to identify and all agree on a map.
You need to decide, when you call an election, you set the question, you need to decide what you're putting before the voters. So if that's going to be a 4-district map, you'd need to select one.
Between now and then.
I'm sorry?
Between now and July 17.
Yes, and if you don't like the 3 that are in the 11 map packet that we have published, we still have time to take one of them, modify it, get it published. We can put it out either this Friday or next Monday. It could be available for then 7-day period of review, discuss it on the 10th. It wouldn't technically, I think, have to actually be available with 7-day period of review until the 17th, but yes, we can certainly do that.
And the option of having more time to consider a 4-district map, if that's what council wanted to do, is not available.
Past July 17th?
Right.
I don't recommend that.
Thank you. If there's no other comments resulting from my questions, I'll open up public comment on this. And I have a number of cards. Let's start with Ms. Lieberman. Welcome, Ms. Lieberman. Good to see you again. You can lower the podium if it's too high for you.
Is this okay? Can you hear me?
Perfect for us.
Okay. I think we're getting to know each other here.
We are.
Yeah, so I have 2 issues to talk about. First of all, there's the issue of including in the ordinance an independent commission for 10 years in the future when the next census comes and the redistricting happens. And that is a best practice, and other cities in our county include it. And I really urge you to specify that. More, and then at a greater length, this election. This idea came out of the blue at the last meeting. I thought we were converging on map 5. You were going to look at tweaking it. It had great public support for the people who came. I thought Councilmember Noack at the last meeting argued very convincingly against doing this. Like, why suddenly are we going to have an election? The election would be between a 5-district model that has had very strong support and a 4-district model that has, as far as I can tell, very little support. So it seems very arbitrary to me, and it will cost the city money. It will cost those of us who care about this money because we'll have to be campaigning. I did notice that the members of the council did support the 4-district model. That was really where the support was coming from. So it seemed like this whole idea of let's put a 4-district and a 5-district map to the public came not from the public comment, but from the council. I'm going to say this. I don't want to think that that's because an at-large election for mayor allows you all to run. I mean, I really want to think better of you than that. And yet my mind does go there. As far as I can tell, the council is empowered to decide about the districts. The council has taken a lot of input from, I think, as Councilmember Noack put it, the people who care will show up. And we have shown up and we keep showing up. And we have said, we want a 5-district map, something like map 5. And so why are we going to have this extra step of throwing in a 4-district map and having an election at the cost of $65,000? So I'm asking you, please don't do this. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Lieberman.
Bob Kattenberg.
Hello, Mr. Kattenberg.
Good evening. I seem to be wearing a path in this rug. My name is Bob Kattenberg. First of all, good evening, Mayor Flaherty, Vice Mayor Rinn, members of the council. I've been a resident, as you well know by now, of Pleasant Hill since 1989. I cannot support putting a ballot measure to the voters this coming March 2024, asking the voters to choose between the default 5-district map and a 4-district plus at-large mayor approach. One reason is that there is no proposed 4-district map that anyone deems worthwhile. A second reason is that no parameters, so far as I know, no parameters regarding an at-large mayor, that is to say term limits, salary, etc., have been worked out. This would end up being an unnecessary rush job. And we found out just a few minutes ago that to have a special election on the ballot would cost the city $65,000 or so. We have a representative form of government. City council members are elected because it is presumed they will know how to deal with complex municipal issues. Therefore, it seems inappropriate for the city council to kick this complex issue back to the voters. Any attempt to have language in the ordinance for a 4+1 ballot measure on the March primary ballot will be seen not as providing an option for the voters, but rather as providing an option for one or more of the sitting city council members to hedge their bets. That's not as it should be. There is plenty of time before an election option is necessary, if at all. There are 4 election cycles before the next census in 2030, plus another 2 years before all the census data is collated, analyzed, and disseminated. By that time, the 2 minority coalition districts, as part of the 5-district default map, would have become well established and represented. Then, with the new census data in hand, any necessary redistricting can be dealt with, along with a reassessment of a 5-district plan versus a 4-district plus at-large mayor approach if needed. For that reason, I recommend that Section 1, Recital M, and Section 3 of the proposed ordinance be deleted. And yes, I read the ordinance in its entirety today. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Kattenberg. Next speaker is Susan Hedgepeth.
Hello again.
Good evening.
Mr. Mayor, council members. My name is Susan Hedgepeth. I'm a resident of Pleasant Hill. I'm here tonight to make comments about the proposed ordinance. I'm pleased you seem to be zeroing in on map 5 as the default. Map 5 is a 5-district map that gives good representation to communities throughout the city and has the support of many community members who have spoken up during this process. However, I request that you remove any provisions in the proposed ordinance that allow for the inclusion of 4-district maps on the March ballot. And I did read the ordinance, and it would be 1M and section 3. I think it's a huge mistake. There's not sufficient reason to put this decision before the voters in March. It's an unnecessary cost. I'm sure there are better things we could spend our money on. Even more concerning, it will be confusing for people who have not been tracking this process from the beginning. In addition to that, all of the 4-district maps submitted are unacceptable because they divide up the neighborhoods. And as you know, keeping neighborhoods together is one of the most important criteria you need to satisfy when you choose district boundaries. Also, changing to an at-large mayor is a big change and should not be done in this way. I liked what the previous speaker had to say about that. Another problem is the ordinance states the city council will decide if there is a need to change the district boundaries after future censuses. No, you should form an independent commission. This was asked for by many community members this time around. Your reason for not doing it was a lack of time. My understanding is that the time was much shorter because we were districting for the first time, whereas after the next census, when we redistrict, if we redistrict, there will be a lot more time and there's really no reason not to form an independent commission. You can look at what Martinez and Brentwood have done successfully. I'd also like to see language in the ordinance that ensures you will use best practices when choosing a future map. Both Common Cause and the League of Women Voters have lists that you could review. Finally, with all the issues we've had this time with notification, the ordinance should include specific requirements to make sure all residents are informed in a timely way and with extra effort made to reach underserved communities. Notices in churches and faith centers and other community centers should be a priority. If you need examples, I'm sure community members can provide them. I'm really quite disappointed at this new direction that you are taking. I thought we were on the right track and that you would choose map number 5 and we could move on. There are many other important things you and we could be doing. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you. Next speaker is Marion Shostrom. Good evening.
Good evening, Mayor Flaherty and council members. I want to talk about the ordinance, and I would respectfully request that you make some changes to the ordinance before it becomes final. And one of the changes would be to include in section 2.55, in section C, language for an independent body when amending district boundaries. As you know, that is a best practice and other local jurisdictions have done that. And so I really hope that you'll add that. And in earlier meetings, some of you expressed a desire to do just that. And maybe you forgot about it. So that's one request. And then I also request that you remove the replacement of this ordinance by future ballot measure from the ordinance. As many people have said, it would be a lot of money, a lot of effort for you all to do that. And I hope that you'll make a decision that you would rather spend your time dealing with, serious budget issues that you have. And the council has made the decision to move to district elections. And we really, the residents of Pleasant Hill, want to move forward together with you to make this place a place that we all want to live in. And thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Shostrom. The next speaker is Amanda Zacketts. Good evening.
Good evening to the council members and the mayor. Can you hear me? I know I'm short.
Perfectly. Perfect.
Okay,
You can lower the podium. There's a lever there if you want.
fancy. Okay. So my name is Amanda Sockotch, and I'm a 20-year resident of Gregory Gardens in Pleasant Hill. And I just want to say that I appreciate all the time and publicity that the city of Pleasant Hill has spent advertising the move to district maps, hanging the large maps in the library for viewing, and inviting comment in person and on Zoom and via email. And I'm also thankful to groups like the League of Women Voters and Pleasant Hill Community Alliance for spreading the word via forums and social media. From my perspective, there have been ample opportunities for any resident of Pleasant Hill to comment on the demographers maps and the community drawn maps. I've come to these meetings in person. I've listened to them online. For what I have witnessed, there's overwhelming disappointment in the demographers maps, which divide up the neighborhoods and dilute the minority vote. By contrast, there's been overwhelming support for community maps, and especially map 5, which keeps keeps communities of interest together as required by voting rights law. In my opinion, it would be a huge waste of taxpayer money to have residents vote on map 4, a map that I haven't really heard anybody speak in support of. When Ken Carlson resigned from the city council to become a supervisor, the council deemed it a waste of taxpayer money to hold an election to replace him, and instead they appointed a new member. And I would ask that the council also now be fiscally responsible and simply adopt map 5, the map with overwhelming community support, rather than spending $66,000 of taxpayer money, which I have to say is more than I make as a teacher, a year. Thank you.
Thank you. Next speaker is Kenji Yamada. Welcome, Mr. Yamada.
Thank you, Mayor, council members. I'm basically echoing what others have said to support map number 5 and oppose putting an item on the ballot in the future in March for a 4-district map. And I also support an independent, a body independent of council for the redistricting after the next census. But I wanted to give the reasoning I think of for those final 2 items. The reason why I think it's not appropriate to put this item on the ballot in March to consider a 4-district map instead, for the voters to consider rather than council, is because that instrument I think is appropriate for an elected body to do when a matter before them is a matter of great division in their electorate. When the constituents have spoken and are sharply divided or just about evenly divided, I think then it can be appropriate for an elected body to put the matter before the voters to directly decide the ballot. This is not such a matter, as you know, and as others have said before me. The community clearly is in favor of map number 5 with 5 districts. So that's why I think that's not appropriate for this matter. Regarding an independent commission, the reason it's not appropriate for a city council to cut districts, to make decisions about districts. I understand there's a time constraint in this case, but as another speaker mentioned, it won't be the case after the next census. The reason it's not appropriate is simply a conflict of interests. Every elected official, of course, has 2 interests in mind at all times: the need to get reelected and the needs of their constituents. That's natural. It's inherent to elected office. And those interests are not necessarily always in conflict, but they are in conflict in the matter of drawing electoral boundaries. And our state has recognized that in the creation of an independent commission for the drawing of our congressional districts after each census. The same principle applies here. Absolutely, council should put in the ordinance tonight or in the next couple of meetings a section taking out of your own hands the power to redraw these districts, or the hands of any future council members when the time comes, to draw the districts in which you yourselves will run. That decision should be made finally by people who are not themselves running. That's a matter of principle. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Yamada. The next speaker is Karen Yap. I didn't think I needed to impose a rule of no clapping. All of you've been here many times, so if you could just refrain on your applause. I appreciate you're all here to support the speakers, but it does distract from the council hearing what people say. Welcome, Ms. Yap.
Hi, good evening. I'm here tonight to ask you to delete section 3 from the proposed ordinance. That section provides for a ballot measure with a 4-district map. As Councilmember Shess said at the last meeting, you have not discussed 4-district maps enough. You led residents to believe that you did not favor that option. At the May 22nd meeting, Mayor Flaherty said, "I am not seeing any resounding support for a 4-district map." As a result, you only have 3 4-district maps to choose from, and none of them are good. You got minimal public comment on them. They all split neighborhoods. Map 1 is the worst. Map 3 is the best, but not good enough. I was surprised at the last meeting when Mayor Flaherty said that the demographer's 4-district map 1 looks pretty good to me. That 4-district map is as bad as the demographer's 5-district map, and you all agreed that was bad. The proposed ordinance doesn't say which 4-district map would go on the ballot. After all the time and care picking a 5-district map, you propose to pick a 4-district map without enough public input? Just to make it clear, I've provided a markup of the map, demographer's map 1. This map splits up neighborhoods. At the top, outlined in green where it says DVC, is the DVC College Park neighborhood split into 2. In the middle is where it's in red outlined as 3 Gregory Gardens sections split into 3 parts. At the bottom, Poets Corner in blue is split pretty much in half. The stars, as you're familiar with, represent council members' homes. Now look at the shape of the districts. District 1 in light blue goes all the way from Lafayette to Martinez to Contra Costa Boulevard. District 4 in pink puts that area by Geary with Sherman Acres and Fair Oaks. I don't understand what they have to do with each other. And all of these districts would fail in a compactness test. The rules regarding districting are clear. Incumbency cannot be a factor in districting decisions. If you select map 1, assuming Councilmembers Rinn and Flaherty win re-election, that map will save 4 incumbent seats. The other 2 maps will only save 2 seats. And how will you explain this complex issue in writing in the election materials? Frankly, I don't trust you to make a clear and impartial ballot measure. You would need an independent commission for this. If you want a 4-district option, you need to solicit new maps from residents and go through the public review process again, focusing on the 4 districts. As you've said before, if a vote for 4 districts is successful, but the map is inadequate, then you will not have met the requirements of the law. So please remove section 3 from the ordinance. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Yap. The next speaker is Matt Kennedy. Thank you for your silent applause. Welcome back.
It's been a while. 5 minutes for this. Okay. Okay, Matt Kennedy, hello council again. First off, I totally agree with everything that's been said. I think a 5-district map, regardless of the actual choice within, is superior. In those choices, I would say it's map number 5. Simply based on diversity of thought, diversity of candidate, we have more candidates. I think that's the direction to move. But one thing I think is interesting is that during these series of meetings, I've noticed that there's been comments to this perhaps is like a special interest group that's driving these choices. You know, maybe we're not seeing the whole community's viewpoint, things of that nature. But it confuses me because if we shift gears back to the housing element discussion, it was determined that there needs to be an audience to listen to this outreach, that you guys can't just do it all. And so the community response was deemed not sufficient enough. So we have community deemed too sufficient, not sufficient enough. Therefore, we should exclude either of them. That's in the housing element and then the voting issue. That's contradictory to me. And so I think it's clear with how this voting issue is going. Oh, and one other thing, with the housing element, it was determined we shouldn't do any more actions, fiduciary duty. But now that's also 180 on the voting issue. Fiduciary duty, we'll figure it out. So it's clear to me that the actions here are prioritizing incumbency above all, which I'm not a politician, but I get how that would work. But you're neglecting any form of public response, whether it's deemed too small, too special, not representative. Then what do we need to actually have public input here? Is it the entire city at City Hall? Because eventually somewhere it has to be representative. And lastly, what you're really telling me, and I hope everyone else can see this, is that you know best, but you're unwilling to share this secret sauce with any of us. That your level of superiority, which I'm sure you guys are all very skilled, I don't know what it takes, but this amount of contradiction with the level of public involvement to me isn't okay. And I hope in the future that you can include and listen to us about these critical issues and not just chide and ignore us.
Thank you, Mr. Kennedy. Next is Jack Prozek. Be happy to pass you for now, Mr. Prozek. Adi Alvera. Good evening. You might want to lower the podium and the microphone.
Very low.
Good evening, council members and mayor. I brought with me today my daughter, who's a student at Sequoia Middle School. I frequent your city every day, Monday through Friday during the school year and sometimes during the summer. I live in Concord for full transparency, but I've been very involved in this process. Also for full transparency, I'm District 4 Director for the Democratic Party. But I'm here because I care about districting in general, following the California Voting Rights Act. Concord went through its own districting process 6-7 years ago. And as a community member there, we advocated for fairness and fair maps for our community. We didn't get that the first time around. There was a community that was very much voting section taken out of their map and put into another area, that it took us another census year to fix that. 10 years later or 6 years later or something like that. And it's just was not very fair to make a community wait that long to feel like their neighborhoods represented them on a district map. So I would just want to come here to share with you that that experience for the community and communities of color felt very much a slap in the face by an all-white city council members in Concord, and people of color are watching what is happening here. There is strong support for District 5 map, and that strong support, I'm happy that you guys have come to see district that map for District 5, the one you've chosen for 5 districts. But putting an ordinance to put a 4-district map on an election on the ballot doesn't seem fair. I know that all of you are great representatives for the city of Pleasant Hill. You shouldn't worry about what voters will do. So don't gerrymander the District 4 map just to continue to keep your seats. If you trust the voters because you have been great to the city of Pleasant Hill, they will vote you back in. I know they will. As the last election, they've chosen many of you again. So please trust the community. Please trust the communities that want to stay together and choose the 5-district map. Eliminate the ordinance section 3 that puts it on the election. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Olvera. Valerie Slovin. Good evening.
Good evening, Valerie Slovin. I live at 978 Santa Cruz Drive. Thank you for the opportunity this evening. Since this process started, I've seen and heard very little support for the 4-district option with an at-large mayor. And I was certainly under the impression that a majority of this council was in support of the map 5-district map. So I was very, very surprised when I tuned into the Zoom meeting at the last meeting that we had. I was out sick, and I was completely bamboozled by what the direction that meeting took, and how the 4-district suddenly took on a much larger life than it has in the past. And the idea of putting it on the ballot was a novel one. it seems like maybe it was the last best chance of getting a 4-district here in Pleasant Hill. I would urge you to please not do that. This is a very complex issue. I know I've struggled with it, and I'm very thankful to the League of Women Voters, the Asian Law Caucus, for educating me about this issue, because it hasn't been easy for me. So I just wonder how you're going to outreach the community and get them to come out and march and vote on a very complicated issue. And the whole ballot, when I was listening to the meeting, my head was just about to explode. So I would urge you, please, to vote for the 5-district and to do your job, please, and not put this on the ballot, because I think it'll be a disaster. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Loven. Amy Brunel. Good evening.
Good evening. Hi, my name's Amy Brownell. I was here in front of this commission. I have no idea, or council, I don't know if any of you were members, about 12 years ago with my daughter, who is now 22, and she had won some award from her drawing some cute little picture at Fair Oaks Elementary, where both my kids attended. I've lived in Pleasant Hill for 21 years at 2 different addresses. During COVID, I had the opportunity to rent my condo to a man and his daughter who were struggling with financial issues. And I felt very blessed to be able to do that. So I lived at another address for a couple of years. I'm here tonight because I have heard from these lovely people who've spent their time. And if you noticed, I came in late because I work in San Francisco. I work for the health department. I have been a city employee for 30 years. And I have been in your position where I've been the employee supplying the information to the Board of Supervisors. And I know what it's like to be on your side of the table. But I'm going to be blunt. The map 5 that my lovely colleague, friends and neighbors have worked so hard on is the map that represents the city. And I think you should use that map, and putting it to the voters for my friends who had to explain it to me, as the last speaker said, it was really not easy to understand. And like I said, I've worked for the city and county of San Francisco. I'm an environmental engineer. I have experience. I know how to listen and figure these things out. And it was not easy. So I could see what a disaster it would be if you put it on the ballot and nobody would know, and they'd have to rely on their friends. And by the way, I'm going to be really blunt. I heard recently that somebody, I don't know who, said something to these folks who have been spending all this time that they're some special interest group who only wants what they want and don't understand the community. You know very well, I did the math right while I was sitting there. You each represent approximately 6,800 people in Pleasant Hill. If there's 5 of you and you divide it by the population, these people represent, if you know anything about connection and neighbors, at least 150 people. They have friends, they talk to friends. They're doing the hard work. I came all the way, I commute on BART, an hour and 15 minutes each way to the city of San Francisco 5 days a week. I did that all during the pandemic, except when we were locked down. Like, I came in because I heard about this, and I want you to get the message. Map 5, do not put it in front of voters. If you're worried that it's not the right map or the census is going to change it, get a commission. The commission will fix it every time there's a new census. Please do the right thing. Do not, it's time to move on. Last thing I'm going to say, I have raised my 2 children here. One of them, a wonderful, identifies as queer. I attended the Pride Parade this weekend. Diversity, inclusion, racial diversity, everything. That's where we're going. Life has changed. Do what you need to do. And just, if you don't get reelected, it's time to move on. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Brunel. Next speaker, Richard Offerman.
Good evening. My name is Richard Offerman and I live in Pleasant Hill. I'm here tonight because I want to speak in favor of having 5 districts. After the mayor recently suggested switching to 4 districts, it is important to note that this would not be fair to the voters. As one who's monitored this council's districting efforts from the start, up to this point, the voters have not been presented any real data regarding the 4 district option. From the start, the first and only 4 district map was that extremely gerrymandered map number 1 that we hope will never see the light of day again. It was insulting to the voters of Pleasant Hill. To now hear Mayor Flaherty say that map 1 is good, given that blatant jog, districting appears to have taken a big step backwards. I must remind everyone that map 1 that our city provided us has a boundary going south down Patterson, but it suddenly jumps and does an abrupt jog 2 blocks west of Shelley. It's easy to see this was an attempt to move the boundary line in order to have it run between council members' homes. This is called gerrymandering, and no form of map 1 will ever be acceptable. But the big issue here is that this council has never really discussed the 4 district option with voters. In fact, this is what several of you said at the last meeting. The districting rules clearly define the need for there to be an open discussion regarding issues, and the number of districts is a huge issue. We have the right to help decide on the districts that will be used in our next 4 city council elections. Now, with the newly disclosed schedule of July 17th deadline, there's not enough time to switch to 4 districts. It is important for me to state that I'm not part of any alliance. In 2000, way back then, I learned that we all need to pay attention to what goes on in this chamber. In 2000, one of our mayors stood right here and told a huge lie to the council, stating that the commission in charge of sister cities had voted for Merzifon Turkey. The council quickly approved it. But the truth was that committee had never voted on it, and they didn't want it. Because of that liar, we ended up with a racist Turkish sister city. It now seems that our council's mapping effort has digressed into focusing on creating maps that work to retain their incumbency rather than creating fair voter districts for the next 4 city council elections. Hopefully no lawsuits show up because of this action. Our wonderful, well-defined neighborhoods finally have a chance to have a neighborhood-specific council member, and the horrible 4 district idea will kill that opportunity. Please remove any and all mention of 4 districts. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Hoffman. Also just wanted to let the viewing public know that we received written comments from Daniel Safran from the United Latino Voices of Contra Costa by the chair, Concepcion James, Lindsay Dolman, Melanie Sakota, Marion Shostrom also wrote in, Terry Dunn, Daniel Rodriguez, Robert Kattenberg also wrote in, as well as Peggy Magellan. I have one more card, but Mr. Prosek says he wants to go last. Is that after the Zoom callers too? Last. Turning then to Carol Wu. Do we have any hands raised on Zoom?
Yes, we have 5 hands raised.
Let's bring them all in.
Ms. Gallagher, please proceed.
Thank you. Yes, I'm Kathy Gallagher. I've lived in Pleasant Hill for a little over 10 years. I support creating 5 district system, specifically map 5. I've been watching this issue, attended all the public hearings, and was disappointed at the last meeting when all of a sudden the 4 district map was brought up. The 4 district maps, as already pointed out, will break up neighborhoods, and communities of interest will not be honored. And that's contrary to the CVRA. I also believe the proposed ordinance should be amended to include a requirement for an independent commission, something that many of us had recommended to your council earlier. And if you add the independent commission for future revisions of district lines, that will make a more fair system for our city. I also don't believe we need a ballot measure to decide this issue. There's been ample public hearings and input on this over the last few months. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Ms. Gallagher. Next Zoom speaker.
Mr. Lewis, please proceed.
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes, good evening, Mr. Lewis.
Yes, hello. I'm sorry I could not be there in person. I'm Marshall Lewis. I'm a resident of Pleasant Hill. I would like to broadly echo many of the responses that, many of the comments that have already been made, encouraging the City Council to officially select map 5 as the standard going forward. I believe that council probably should vote to adopt the proposed ordinance. I don't know if you can do amendments to it right now. I don't know how much wiggle room you have for possible changes. If you're able to make changes, then I would strongly recommend having an independent redistricting commission. That's the gold standard. It's something that I personally think should be law at all levels of government, that elected officials should not use their electorates. The third action item on this part of the agenda is directing city staff to move forward with some plans for the possible ballot measure with the 4-district map. I would encourage council to not direct city staff to move forward with that. As we've already seen, that path is fraught, shall we say. It's not an especially popular path. It's not an approach that has received adequate discussion by council. It's also something where I get the impression that there are many council members who are not fully comfortable with it, who are thinking that perhaps they can simply put the decision to voters and wash their hands of making that decision. That's not how it's going to be received. If council does vote to put a ballot measure on the ballot, then everybody's going to understand that as council supporting that ballot measure. And that's going to lead to a lot of confusion. It's going to lead to people possibly misunderstanding council members' motivations. It's not a good path to go down. I think that if there is going to be a ballot measure, the best way to do that would be not for council to bring it forward, but for a group of concerned citizens to bring it forward. Because in California, we do have a local initiative process. So I think that that would be a much better pathway. It would separate the issue from council a little bit. It would demonstrate that there is popular support. And if there's not enough popular support for an initiative, then there we go. That would indicate that there's not enough popular support for that course of action. So I would encourage council to not direct city staff to move forward with those discussions on the 4-district map, and instead to simply move forward with the 5-district one and take the possibility of a 4-district map off of council's side of things and move it over to the political sphere. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Lewis. May we have the next Zoom speaker?
Ms. Thompson, please proceed.
Hello, my name is Jonna Thompson and I am a resident of Pleasant Hill. I was recently appointed to the Diversity Commission, but today I make my comment of my own volition. I've attended every meeting that was held in regards to going to by-district elections. Through public comment and discussion, it was clear that the majority of the people who have made time to come in, call in, and write in a public comment have been in support of 5 districts and map 5. During the last meeting, Mayor Flaherty advocated to put a ballot initiative in for the March primaries to provide an opportunity for residents to vote on a 4-district map with an at-large mayor, stating he had spoken to residents who have a different opinion on the maps and would prefer a 4-district map with an at-large mayor and should be given an opportunity to vote. During the 8 public meetings held since March, these additional individuals mentioned by the mayor with differing opinions have not made the time to come in, call in, or write in their opinion. They have refused to go on public record to state their case. Moving forward with a ballot initiative would show preferential treatment to the donors of the council and their friends, and a lack of regard to the public that has attended these discussions and overwhelmingly asked for 5 districts. I ask the council to revise the ordinance and remove section 1M and section 3. These 2 sections discuss adding a ballot measure to the March primaries for the option of an at-large mayor and a 4-district map. The large majority of residents who have made public comment agree with the council members Sue Noack and Shess that map 5 and a 5-district map is the best option for Pleasant Hill at this time. Once districts are established, a new census is conducted, and the minority districts have gained their sea legs, we can put on at-large mayor to a vote by the people of Pleasant Hill. By that point, all of the residents would have participated in district elections and have a better understanding of the process and would be better suited to make an informed decision with their vote. The principle of fair district maps prioritize maintaining neighborhoods' cohesion and communities of interest together to grow a stronger community where every voice within the community is represented. At this moment, this can be accomplished through a 5-district map, specifically map 5. The council has the opportunity to elevate the voices of the minorities in our city. Please don't silence us with a vote led by the people that have run Pleasant Hill the last few decades. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Thompson. I'm glad you found Wi-Fi from Twain Hart.
I did. I'm glad to be here.
We're always happy to see you. Next Zoom caller, please.
Mr. Tubbs, please proceed.
Hello. I am
evening.
Eric Tubbs. I am a 15, almost 20-year resident of Pleasant Hill, and I'm just here to say that when it comes to the for the districting process, I would love to see that we use map 5 in particular, the 5-member district that was previously discussed as like the go-to for our city, in part because primarily it uses already existing geographic structures such as major roads, Contra Costa Boulevard, Taylor Boulevard, as indications for basically where the districts are. And as we previously saw from the 4-district map, it doesn't really follow these major features nearly as closely. And I think that that's very important going forward for both all the districts, so that way people know what can be, their community of interest, geographically speaking, as well as it maintains the interested minority communities such as the Slavic American, Indian American, Asian American, Native American communities within Pleasant Hill, make sure that, they're represented well in the districts that they're in, since I know that particularly the eastern and northern districts are where those communities, according to the demographic data, are most closely, are most present, I guess is the right way to phrase that. Secondly, I would like to see that we do not go to a 4-member district, considering that it's obvious based on all the comments that have already been previously made that there is not nearly as much community support for that. I understand that this is going to be one of those push-pull relationships between, you as the councilors and us as the constituents, because at the end of the day, I recognize that there is a lot of anxiety for you guys of if it goes to a 5-member district, that's going to make it much more difficult to know who's going to be mayor. And more particularly is that it's a complete shift away from the system we had of, having people elected at large. I understand that and I recognize that. And I support it going to a district or to a ballot initiative so we can actually see just what do the people of Pleasant Hill want. I think that even if that might cost more, at the end of the day, it's an important part of our democracy to see that go to the people and see what the people of Pleasant Hill want more generally. And I would also like to express my support for those city members or city council members that we have that have already previously expressed their support for that 5-member district process. So thank you for your time.
Thank you, Mr. Tubbs. We have a 5th caller on Zoom.
Yes, we have one hand left.
Hello, is that working?
Yes, hello.
Please proceed.
My name is Titsa Gopal. I'm with the Asian Law Caucus. We're a nonpartisan legal aid nonprofit that works on civic engagement, community education, and voting rights around the Bay Area. And I just have a very quick comment. I want to uplift the feedback we've heard tonight from the community, which has been really overwhelming, and specifically express our support for District Map 5. We believe a 5-district map would allow for the most fair and effective representation of Pleasant Hill's incredible diversity. And it would do the best job preserving communities of interest. We've seen dozens and dozens of members of the community come testify in this process over the last several months, supporting map 5 and urging the council to keep their neighborhoods whole, in contrast to other proposed maps, especially demographers, that would really unfairly divide those communities. So I just wanted to very quickly comment and respectfully ask the council to do the right thing tonight, to take this overwhelming public feedback to heart, and please adopt a 5-district map, and please prioritize maintaining communities of interest. Thanks for allowing me to comment tonight.
Thank you. Are there any other Zoom callers?
There are no additional hands raised.
All right. I have one last card, Jack Prosek.
Good evening, Mayor Flaherty and council members. As you know, my name is Jack Prosek. I'm a 46-year resident and homeowner. All that time, same house, 46 years here in Pleasant Hill. My background is as a civil engineer, licensed in the state of California and Illinois at one time. And my history was, my career was in building construction management. And I want to start out by first of all saying that I have no connection whatsoever to any of the special interest groups that have been involved in this process. But I do want to thank the almost unanimous support for map number 5, which I solely created. Quite frankly, I expected to see at least 20 to 30 maps being submitted for this process. But like Mayor Flaherty indicated the other week, very disappointed in the very low level of interest that has been taken by the majority of citizens of our town. I think one of the reasons for that is that they feel that there's very little that that they would affect, that they could say that would affect the outcome. The many supporters of map number 5, I've never had any personal contact with most of them, amazingly enough. The census tracts, I'm really disappointed that we can't make a map that is a better fit for the city of Pleasant Hill, that we have to be rigidly bound by census tracts, and that we can't do better, as I have suggested in writing to both the subcommittee and to the council. And I think the one thing I do want to add is that before I say that, I think as far as the level of interest, I think if people feel that they might have some impact on the outcome, such as happened with the housing element, that they will show up in large numbers. But the majority of the people have little interest or feeling it's not worth their time. But I also do want to support all of the people who have spoken and written regarding the 4+1 plan, the elected mayor at large. And I too support the deletion of those portions of the ordinance that is on the agenda this evening. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Prosek. That's all the cards I have. Seeing no further cards and no one on Zoom,
No one on Zoom.
then we'll close public comment and we'll take a 10-minute break. We convene at 9:11. Thank you.
Yeah. Map 5's your map. Yeah.
Welcome back to the city council meeting. We've closed public comment on item 10.4 and bringing it back to council for discussion. Start us off here.
I can start.
Yeah, please, Vice Mayor Rinn.
So generally, I think what we discussed and the commonality is there's general consensus on map 5, the 5 districting as the default come November election 2024. That is the map. I think where we wanted to have a discussion was, does the city of Pleasant Hill want to have a directly elected mayor? And so with that, that would produce a 4 district map. So the idea is, what does that look like for a directly elected mayor? And I previously talked about kind of what districting means. And I know there's a lot of confusion and different information out there, but currently within that large format, representation from Pleasant Hill is Pleasant Hill voters every 2 years would either get to vote for 3 people or vote for 2 people. And generally elected, so all 5, in theory, would be representative of the city of Pleasant Hill because everybody's had an opportunity to vote for all 5. And then with that practice has been a rotation amongst those 5 elected people by the whole city of Pleasant Hill. And with that, as a voter, you feel like you've had representation because you had an opportunity to vote for all 5 of the council members, and knowing that whether 1 or 2 of your candidates got in or none of your candidates or all your candidates, you know that that person was something you had an opportunity to vote for as mayor of your city. And that's the rotation. A lot of people are trying to make the analogies, well, you're currently rotating, so just rotate again. But it's different because when you go into districting, you're 1 of 5. You're only 20% representation of the 100% voting population. When you vote, so like Zach is, and potentially in the 5 district would be my representative. So I had an opportunity to vote for him in 22 to get on council. And my next chance would be 26. And who knows where he would be in the mayor cycle, but there would be 4 other people potentially that I never had a chance to vote for or have any say or participation. And they would be rotating in as mayor. So that's why I just wanted to have the discussion and put it out to the people of Pleasant Hill is, do they want to have a say, not only just with one person in their district, but to have a second say as who their mayor can be to represent them through the city. As far as the 4 district map, that can all be worked out, like which ones are drawn and things like that, in my personal opinion. But the idea was just, what do the people of Pleasant Hill want to do? Do they want to have a second vote for a mayor to represent them besides just a person in their district? And so that's the theory behind it. And that's just my 2 cents of my perspective where I come. But I think we're all in consensus about a 5 district as far as the process for November. But if the city of Pleasant Hill, 50% or more, want to have a directly elected mayor, then that would change things. But if they choose not to, and are in the majority that we've heard speak before us, then the default would automatically take place and it'd be a 5 district map. And I think that is my assumption. Am I correct, city attorney? Okay. Well, so that's just my 2 cents on that. But and the thought behind of wanting to have a second person to help represent me and have a say in who that person is, and not just having 20% representation up here. So that's my thought.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Anybody, Councilmember Vinson?
Sure. I agree. If we go with the 5 district map, I think obviously map number 5 is the one to use. I've got some concerns going forward with the ballot measure and going to the 4 districts though. One is, what would the term of office be? I've heard 2 years mentioned, which I don't think works because it's time consuming and expensive to run for the mayor every 2 years. So the option there is 4 years. What are the actual duties of the mayor? Right now, I think it's more ceremonial, conducting our meetings, representing the city at various functions. The members of the community that I've heard support the 4 district map really haven't pointed out which map they would prefer. I think they like the idea of the mayor, but there's really not a map out there that they're pointing to that would satisfy their needs. It would be a little bit unusual for this type of an election because it's not clear to me who would be promoting it or arguing in favor or against. I know some of the people here would have an opinion, but it's not the typical measure where you have a committee that's really out there supporting it. It's more just go out there and vote. I've talked to a number of people in the city, and when you talk about having a ballot measure and maybe two ballot measures, it's very confusing. I've been to all the meetings but one, and I think I know what I'm talking about when I talk to folks, but it's very, very challenging to explain it to them. We do district elections for the County Board of Education, for our supervisors, the water district. So it's not something that's entirely new. I think waiting till March, it may not be fair to some of the potential candidates because you like to plan early for your campaign. If it's not till March, you may not know what district you're going to be representing. So whether it's one of the small 5 districts or a larger one of the 4 districts or even running for mayor, that could make it even more challenging to do the fundraising. So personally at this point, because of the time limitations we've heard about, I think it would be a real challenge to go with the 4 district map. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Shess.
Thank you, Mayor. It's I think it's pretty clear that we all believe in district that the map 5 as a way of going for a 5 district is kind of the way we're leaning. I'm a little, it's interesting. It's like, I hear we want independent commissions, but then don't put it to the voters to vote. And to me, that's not congruent. That being said, I think there's not a map 4 there that I like in particular. And I'm sure obviously you all feel the same way. So I like the idea, if we can create a map that checks all the boxes of a 5 district map, but it gives the flexibility of having an at-large mayor, I think it's worth considering. And I think it's worth, but I don't, but what I'm concerned about is the time factor that we're under right now. And I think it's worth it. When we first started this process, we had that first district, that 5 district map, everyone didn't like it. And I said weeks ago, this is an iterative process, right? And so I believe that if we had a little more time, I think we could work together and come up with a 4 district map that would be contiguous, that could, provide the minority representation that we all want. But I just don't know if we have that time yet. I just don't think. I like it in principle. I like that idea, but again, I'm a little leery. Councilmember Vinson made a really interesting point there about having not a candidate who's probably looking to maybe run in 2024, not knowing what district. I mean, that's a really interesting point that I hadn't even thought about. So, I mean, I like the idea of giving residents a choice. The people I've heard tonight say that's too complicated. No, it's not. We have statewide ballot measures that we deal with every year. And the people I have been hearing during this whole process are very intelligent, very thoughtful people. They could handle this. You could handle that. I'm not concerned about that. I'm just concerned about the time that we have to get this done. And so I like the notion of it. I hope that maybe eventually we could look at this. But right now, I don't know if we really have that time.
Thank you. Councilmember Noack.
Well, I think I made, most of you probably heard all my comments the last time we spoke on this, and I'm still of the same vein. I think we tried very hard to get information out to the public, and we didn't get much response. Personally, I think people just think, well, the city's pretty well run. I'm not going to get in the middle of this, and that's fine. But we have, when there's an issue that came up on the housing element, we had this room full, the community room full, we had people online. It was, when people really are concerned about an issue, they show up in the hundreds, right? And that hasn't been the case here for, I don't know what reason, honestly. I think Councilmember Shess pointed out an interesting point. We had a lot of push to get public involvement. And then when we say we're going to take it to the public, then there's a pushback. So that's kind of strange to me. You know, there are people questioning the integrity of this body in putting these maps together. And I, you know, and I've indicated my concern about that. We have the maps that were drawn by the demographers were done solely to get the highest percentage minority in a district. And that's what those maps did. You cannot find a map submitted by anybody that has a higher percentage minority that is legally defensible than those two maps. That's the only reason they were drawn that way. No gerrymandering. Yeah, it's weird. There was a weird line. But honestly, whether that line was there or whether it was on the other side, Mayor Flaherty couldn't run again, no matter what. Whatever line that was, he's not going to be able to run again, period. So it was a matter of whether Matt couldn't run again or Alan couldn't run again. But that line didn't impact him at all, or Councilmember Shess. So I think people need to take a step back. And I think there's some comments, there's some confusion out there that if we're liked, we can get elected again. That's not accurate. Next year, if we go with map 5, next year, Councilmember Vinson, Mayor Flaherty, and Councilmember Rinn cannot run because they are in the district of Councilmember Shess, who just won in November. They cannot run again. They can run against Councilmember Shess 2 years later in 2026. So there's confusion about somehow council members, if they've done a good job, can run again. They can't. 3 of them cannot run next year, period. And no matter what map we had, either 2 or 3 or even at times 4 of us could not run again. So there was no gerrymandered map that saved this council, period. None, not a single one. And so accusations about that are just false. Be that as it may, I would like to get this behind us. I think map 5 honors the communities that we have. It does what we need to do from a minority perspective. And I'd be happy to make a motion to just go with map 5, period, and not have the option of doing a ballot measure. I do think they're confusing. I think it's difficult. While I'd love to see the people of this city be able to have 2 representatives on this council rather than 1, I think the measure will be difficult, and I think it will be very confusing to the public if you haven't sat through so many of these meetings. So that's my position, and I'd be happy to make a motion to just give direction, because I can't, the ordinance is not written that way. So I would be happy to just recommend that we move just to the map 5 and call it a day.
I agree.
Thank you. I'll just share my comments too. It's an interesting position, sitting here in the center, just by luck this year, really, happenstance. And I agree with all of you, really. So it's an interesting issue that we all have, I think, similar sentiments. I think it's important just to step back and refresh ourselves how we got here. When the issue of district elections was first brought to the council's attention by letter back, I think in January, February, when we had our first public meeting, the council quickly coalesced behind the idea of district elections. There's never been resistance to it. We all see the benefit of it and completely support it. Then the map process, as Councilmember Shess said, was an iterative process. It was a learning process. But as early as the Saturday meeting at the community room, I think a majority of the council expressed interest in map 5. So there's never really been an issue since the maps were created and we had an opportunity to discuss them and get a better understanding of which criteria were important. I think initially I thought that the most important factor was to increase the representation of the members of the city that had not been properly represented up to this point, and learned that that's not the primary issue. The primary issue is the retention of the neighborhoods without regard to how it affects the minority coalition. and was even surprised to see that some of the proponents of district elections were advocating maps that gave less representation to the minority coalition, minority majority, than the maps of the demographer. The demographer maps clearly were wonky. They made no sense to anybody who had any real knowledge, boots on the ground knowledge of the city of Pleasant Hill and its boundaries and its neighborhoods. And it's also been a lesson to me about how you can say something off the cuff and it takes on a life of its own. I did say that map 1 looked good to me, but in reading it and hearing how people reacted to it, I clearly did not express myself well or properly. What map 1 in the 4-district side looked good to me, again, was looking at the representation it provided to the various members of the population here. The boundaries make no sense. And that's certainly nothing I would advocate. And I do appreciate some of the public comments pointing out the ridiculousness of the 4-district map 1 and how it divided the various neighborhoods in 2 or 3 slices. But recognizing that we quickly coalesced behind the idea of district elections and even the map 5, and as those of you who've been following, the idea of the 4-district direct elect mayor has been in place since day 1, but it really didn't get the airtime that the 5-district map did, primarily, I think, because all of the public comment was geared towards the 5-district map. But as we move closer to decision-making time, we had to deal with the 4-district map. And I do believe it was comments of Vice Mayor Rinn, similar to those that we heard tonight, which again, I agree with, that led me to just have this, light bulb moment of, well, let's put it to the public to decide, because clearly I said, I didn't think there was an appetite at the council level to adopt a 4-district direct elect mayor. But as I've said from the very beginning, I see the benefit that has nothing to do with my personal interest to having a direct elect mayor as the city moves to different types of governance for all the reasons Vice Mayor Rinn expressed. And I can't say why, other than the handful of people that have shown up at meetings and have written letters and are part of the public record advocating for the 4-district direct elect mayor. It may be, as Councilmember Noack says, that they're just very comfortable with how this council and prior councils have run the city, how our city manager, our city staff have run the city, that they just trust that whatever decision is made, they're fine with it. So just focusing on where we are tonight, the proposed ordinance, the problem I see with the proposed ordinance is that there's no time to fill in the blanks of a 4-district map. As I take the advice of our city attorney, that says that we need to have that map wrapped up by July 17. That's just not possible. And for that reason, I just don't think the ordinance as proposed should be adopted by council. I think we would need to just go to a 5-district map. So I think the only other comment that I heard and saw in writing and heard tonight was about including an independent commission for potential redistricting at the next cycle of the census. As I understand the CVRA, that process needs to occur anyway, the redistricting and review of it. And I will defer to the council that's in play 10 years from now to decide how to handle that issue. Just as Ms. Bernal said earlier that she was here in 10 years ago. None of us were here. None of us were here when she was last here with her daughter. Well, I can speak for myself. I won't be here 10 years from now. And I don't, well, maybe some of the council might be here if they are that dedicated. But that would be quite a lengthy term of service. So I would defer to the council in play at the time of the next redistricting, because it has to look at it anyway to decide how it thinks it should best deal with redistricting at that time. So those are my comments. So not putting words in anybody's mouth, but what I'm hearing is that at least a majority of the council would direct staff to remove the 4-district option from the ordinance. Yes. And bring it back to council for just an adoption of map 5 and the generic language about adoption of map 5 implementation. And do we need to discuss the rotation of districts? I know that the districts that Councilmember Shess and Noack would inherit, there's no election in 24, but the other three districts would be in play.
Would be up in 24. That's correct.
Okay.
And so we need to call a special meeting for July 10th.
So not to ruin everybody's weekend, but we do have a meeting on July 3rd, and I don't know if I canceled it already.
No,
Did
it's
I?
been
I
canceled.
already tell everybody. it was
Yeah,
canceled?
it's been canceled.
Good try, though.
All right,
July 10th.
fine. Well,
Yep.
So there is no further direction to explore any more 4-district maps.
I don't see that there's time to do that. You know, as I understand it, the council between now and whenever the deadline is could decide it wants to do a ballot measure. It's just not tied to the adoption here.
I'm
I don't
sorry.
think the issue's ever going to come up again, but
I'm sorry. Repeat that.
if this council sometime between now and the end of the year decided it wanted to hold a special election in March to adopt a different map, could that be done?
I don't think so.
You have committed to, if you do
I
the
get you.
ordinance, the
I get-
way,
Well, then
You
the
would-
citizen initiative could do it if they want.
well, citizens
All right, fine.
initiative, but
That's
that's different.
And the proponents of that could do it that way. So short answer, yes, no further discussion on a 4-district map. Again, I'm speaking for myself.
I agree.
Yeah, we,
Okay. I thought I heard.
Yep.
Okay, so do you want to have a meeting on the 10th?
It just needs to be 5 days before the 17th.
It
correct?
does.
I'm just pulling up the calendar.
That's a Monday. The 10th is a Monday.
That's fine with me.
Yep.
All right, so there's
So I
nothing,
see consensus for bringing back map 5 as fill in the blank on a 5-district map only on a special meeting on July 10th for introduction and then for adoption on July 17th.
correct.
Correct.
Got it. You have any question? Okay. Thank you.
Thank you. I think that concludes the discussion on 10.4. As we adjourn, I just want to adjourn in the memory of John Stoner. John Stoner was a Pleasant Hill resident for 23 years. He served on our Commission on Aging, volunteered at the Pleasant Hill Library, was a driver for the Concord Senior Van Program, a parent volunteer for local soccer. And John worked for Lawrence Berkeley National Lab in data and archive management from 94 to 2017. John died unexpectedly and was a recent and really valued appointee to our Commission on Aging, or as some people call it, Commission on Aging Well. And so in his honor, we'll adjourn this meeting to our special meeting of July 10, 2023 at 7 p.m. Thank you all very much for your interest and comments tonight, and good night.